All right. Yeah, just 2 injuries to report. Trajan Jeffcoat with the elbow and Shane Lemieux with the ankle. So that was the only 2 things we had from an injury standpoint in today's practice.
Severity on those?
Look, we just came off the practice field, so we'll deal with it as, whatever the case may be.
Dennis, I know it's still very early in camp, obviously, but what have you seen about the offense being put in now and how it's kind of progressed with guys looking better?
Yeah, look, I mean, well, look, certainly, it's there's different terminology to what we're doing now and what's been done here in the past. There's a little bit different philosophy and teaching and how things are being taught, and there's a few, new wrinkles and different things that we're doing. Look, the reality in our league is, there's only so many types of run plays you can run, and there's only so many types of passing plays you can run. It's really more about, the detail, with which you operate, and then how do you make it cohesive to where, one play can lead to the next, to the next, to the next, and I think that's probably where, we focused on a little bit.
Yeah, at this point, how have you seen Pete Werner just kind of respond to the challenge? Bringing in different guys.
Yeah, look, I think he had a tremendous spring. I think he started off, first couple of days of camp. He's made some plays, made a really nice play on a screen play today. So I think he's responded exactly how I would have expected him to respond, and he's taken to the challenge, and I think he's done a good job to this point.
Dennis, your linebackers now athletic enough that maybe you could play 3 linebackers in situations that you might have played 5 DBs in the past? Some situations.
Yeah, potentially. I'm not ready to make those judgments right now, being that we're 2 days into training camp. So I think that remains to be seen. I do think that we have some athleticism at the linebacker position, and a lot of that comes to matchups too. How does our linebacker match up versus their receiving tight end or their 3rd wide receiver or whatever the case may be? So, I think, look, it might lead to an option, but I can't tell you what we do right now.
In going to get Willie Gay, is that part of maybe what you're thinking, is that it gives you more choices of how to use personnel?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think, at the end of the day, you're looking for, a skill set and a play demeanor, and then hopefully you can fit that into your culture and your scheme and what you want to do, whether it be defensively, offensively, in the kicking game, whatever the case may be. So, look, we saw a fast, tough, athletic linebacker, and now we're in the process of figuring out how does he fit in, what can he do, in what areas can he help us, where does he need to improve. All those things are things that we're figuring out right now.
Speaking of guys you've challenged, I think you're kind of bluntly honest about what Cam Jordan needed to do more of last year, even before the ankle injury. How have you seen him coming into this camp, and do you think he can kind of get back to the spot he was before?
Yeah,
last year?
look, here's the thing with Cam, like he's an unbelievable athlete in terms of just his physical conditioning and his durability and his availability. Has probably been one of the most impressive things I've seen from an NFL player. And so I think that's a good quality for him to have. I think he understands that, he didn't play to the level that he wants to play at, nor that we need him to play at. He knows that he's got to be better, and he's not the only one in that boat. And so I think our whole football team has come here with a sense of purpose to improve individually and collectively as a group.
What have you seen from him so far, coming in, conditioning, all that? It seems like he's a little lighter. I don't know.
Yeah, he's probably a little bit lighter. But look, he's come into camp in shape. I think one of the things that we've got to do for him, and it's always one of these balances that you have to be able to do when you have an older player or a veteran player, you know, is how do you manage the load that they're taking, knowing that they've gotten a ton of snaps, and yet I don't care who you are. At some point, you have to get yourself ready to play the game of football, and so, look, I think we'll see a little bit more Cam in training camp this year than maybe what we've seen in the past, and yet we're going to do some things to modify his workload.
When you talk about like there's only so many run plays you can do and everything like that, you still hear some of the offensive linemen talk about how this is a very friendly scheme for offensive linemen. Would you agree with that? Why do you think that is?
Well, I've never played offensive line, so I couldn't really give you that answer. No, I think here's the reason why I think it's a friendly scheme, because I think from a schematic standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, I think we know exactly what we're looking for. I think we know exactly how things we want to be done, and there's not a lot of gray area in terms of how we need to execute the offense. And I think players can appreciate that, and at least it gives them, you know, they know exactly what they're required to do, and so I think that's why you might hear them say it's a friendly, you know, offense. The other thing I would say for an offensive lineman that makes it friendly is there's run, and then there's play action that comes off of it, and certainly you're going to get your drop back stuff, and there's going to be some situations in the game that dictate that, you know, we're going to see drop back passing game, whether it be in a 2-minute situation, third down, whatever the case may be, and I think that's challenging on an offensive line when the defense knows that you're going to drop back and throw the football, and so being able to keep the defense off balance a little bit, I think is probably another way that becomes friendly for the offensive line.
How do you think they've changed in demeanor as far as the O-line's approach to the scheme? Have they had a different approach or upbeat attitude or something different?
Well, look, I think anytime you do something new, there's a sense of urgency and there's an increased concentration on what's being taught, because ultimately it's the player's job to know what to do. It's our job as the coaches to help them do it better, but they've got to learn what their assignment is, and that's their job. And so I think anytime you bring something new in, there's an increased sense of urgency or sense of focus on making sure you know what to do.
As you kind of piece together your offensive line, is there a checklist in your head on what you need to see to kind of formulate what those 35 would look like?
Yeah, look, I would say there's not this formal checklist that I've got that I'm marking off, but certainly there's things that we feel like we need to see, and I feel like I need to see throughout the course of training camp and as we get into these preseason games, and that's all part of the evaluation process.
Dennis, Rod Teamer had a play in the last 11-on-11. What have you seen out of Rod Teamer so far?
2 days of practice.
Well, you've had him for a couple of months, right?
Yeah. No, look, I mean, he's a veteran player. He's kind of, you know, somewhat established himself as being a pretty decent special teams player. But I've seen a guy that's come in, picked up the defense pretty well, understands what to do. He's been a pro. He's come in, been quiet, gone to work, done everything that we've asked him to do, and that's what happens. Like you just watch day in and day out, and the guys that make plays, they catch your eye, and then all of a sudden they make another play, and they catch your eye a little bit more, and they make another play, and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, that's one of the guys that you're putting in there thinking that maybe this is a guy we can count on. I don't think we're at that point in 2 days into training camp, but that's a nice start.
Well, rotating.
It was a hell of a play today, by the way. That was a hell of a play.
Well, rotating Spencer and Jake kind of be like an every other day thing, or what made you kind of go with that today in terms of Spencer?
Well, look, I think both those two are competing, and so yeah, I would venture to say throughout the course of training camp that you'll see both of them run with a third group. You'll see both of them run with a second group, and I think it's not like we're gonna, you know, have a certain. It's not like we have a schedule mapped out, you know, exactly what we're going to do. But I would expect that throughout the course of training camp, they'll both get reps with the twos and both get reps with the threes.
What's your philosophy on when you might start rotating first team reps at right tackle and left guard? Do you want to give those guys as much leash as possible?
Yeah, look, I was talking to some of the coaches this morning, and you know, right now you have your first group, you have your second group, you have your third group, and here's what I need to see. I need to see somebody in the second group that catches my eye enough to say, hey, this guy needs to go run with the ones. Same with the third group going to the second group, you know, and so I think we have a starting place where we're at right now. And I think we need to see that group of 5 work together and see what that looks like. But then I also think, you know, it's really kind of the player's job to say, I deserve to be up there with the ones, and when they prove they're deserving of that, then I think that's the time that we start getting them some reps here.
How about with Penning and Saldivari in particular? Because obviously there are a lot of positions we've seen over the years where you do that every other day thing, and guys are competing. But with those guys being young, like, does it value them more to get 20 practices in a row than having to do the every other day thing?
Well, I think it benefits our whole offense when there's some continuity in there. I think when you are mix matching every single, you know, whether every period, every day, whatever the case may be, I think it becomes a little bit more challenging, in particular at that position, the offensive line position. I think there's some other positions that it's not quite the same, but I think at that position, the synchronicity that has to go in with everybody being on the same page is important in that position.
And that 5 you're talking about, that includes getting on the right tackle and Saldivari on the opposite of Cesar?
I couldn't hear you.
That they said the 5 you're going with now, that more or less is with Penning at the right tackle and Saldivari at the opposite guard and Fuaga at the left.
Yeah, that's where we're starting out at right now. Yeah, absolutely.
I want to clarify something you were saying about Cam. So if you're trying to manage his snap count, why would he get more snaps in training camp? Would that be like a conditioning thing? Or?
Well, look, there's going to be there was times in past years where he got very, very minimal reps in training camp. So I think there's a happy ground in there. He's got to get enough reps that he can get his body and his mind prepared for an NFL football season. And yet, as an older player, I don't want to use all his reps up during training camp. So I think there's a balance that has to go along with doing that.
As far as the defensive end position in general, obviously we haven't seen Chase yet, but how do you view that competition? It feels like, you know, there's 5 players that should feel like, hey.
Yeah, I think there's a good competition there, and I think we got to let them go out there and play and compete and see who wins the jobs and where, you know, who makes the team, who's on the practice squad, who's a starter, who's a backup, you know, who's a rotational player. I mean, I think all those things are to be determined. I do think we got some talent at that position, and you know, a couple young guys that I think need to come on and step up and prove themselves in Foskey and Peyton Turner. Veteran guy like Cam that's got to prove that he can still do it. You know, a guy like Chase Young, who we don't have any experience with, he's got to earn his keep here. I mean, I just think that's the way it's going to be.
Dennis, do you think, yesterday Alvin talked about how that running back at 30, you know, this people say it's a decline. You got Demario Davis who's mid-30s right now. What have you seen in this game that makes you say this is a guy, his game hasn't declined, in fact he's playing as well as ever?
Yeah, yeah, I think when you look at him, I think there's some things from a mental standpoint that he does much better than he did 3 or 4 years ago. And then there's some things physically that he may not do quite as well as he did 3 or 4 years ago. But I think the mental part of it is what allows him to still play at an extremely high level. The other thing I would say is, you know, we talk about age. You know, age matters more and more the less you do to take care of yourself. The more of a pro you are and the better you take care of your body, the more chance you have of playing a long time. Now, obviously, there's some injury things and things like that take place, but I think, you know, the way that these guys, in particular Cam and Demario, the way that they take care of themselves off the field, I think has led to, you know, an increased length in career and their ability to play at a high level for a long time.
What did Jordan Mims do? He seems like he's gotten a lot of valuable reps ahead of even some more experienced running backs, even dating back to OTAs. What did he do to catch up?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think he's made some good runs. You know, I mean, he's made some runs that have stood out. I think he's done a good job in protection. He's done a good job with his routes. And you see him running the right tracks and making the right cuts and making the right reads. And so when you do things like that, it's like we were talking about earlier. When you do something, it catches my eye, and then all of a sudden you get another rep, and then you do something else that catches my eye, you start getting more and more reps. So yeah, I would say he's done some things to catch my attention.
Dennis, is there a certain level of pressure that comes with being considered, as Chris talked, being looked at as the number one receiver, and now you're looking as the guy leading that group?
Look, I think the pressure comes from within, all right, and your own motivation to be the best. I think that's the only pressure that any of us face, is our own internal motivation to be the very best that we can possibly be. And really, if I'm committed to doing whatever it takes, then it's really not pressure at all. It's just it becomes who I am. And look, Chris Olave's got a chance to be as good as he wants to be. You know what I mean? And so it's really up to him to kind of determine how good he wants to be and how much he's willing to sacrifice to get there. And I think he's willing to do those things.
Well, how good, or rather, what's your expectations of how good you expect him to be in your career?
Yeah, look, I mean, I expect him to be an extremely good receiver for us. And that's all I'm really concerned about. You know what I mean? I'm expecting him to be the best that he can possibly be. Show up every day, come to work his tail off, and be the best that he can be. And if he does that, then he'll be plenty good enough for us. All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.